ahead and get started. Thank you for coming to this week's Times Talk. That's all about banned books. So why do we talk about banned books? It's because we want to celebrate diverse voices and celebrate our right to read. So we have a panel up here that we've asked to come and just kind of start the dialogue and start the questions and start the conversations about banned books and why do we even talk about them and what's the importance of banned books. So if we can go down the panel and just introduce yourselves, who you are on campus, and then we'll go back through and just kind of start down the line again to share about their specific experiences with banned books and what it means to them. And then we'll get started with other dialogues as well. So up here I have the rest of our Banned Books Week events. So we're here at the Times Talk, but then on Friday we have a Banned Books fashion show and read aloud. So from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. right here in this space again, we'll have kind of a drop-in open mic style read aloud where you can read excerpts about from your favorite banned books, or just if you want to prepare anything or just read and talk about banned books, you can do that as well. And then we'll also have costumes. People will come with their costume representing one of their favorite banned books. So come and see the costumes. We'll have a costume contest and a voting booth, and there'll even be a prize for the best costume. So
it's like is it money or something?
It's a gift basket.
Okay, well, there you go.
So a gift basket as a prize, and we'll have lots of food and just different things there. So drop in, pop in, and share your costumes with us on Friday. So thank you for coming. Sharon, if you want to get
So
started.
do you want me to start?
Yeah, if you want to get started, then we'll go down that way and then come
Okay.
back around.
My name is Sharon Wilson. I teach in the English department. Young adult literature is my quote-unquote thing. I read an average of probably 250 books a semester, trying to get caught up with what is contemporary, what is important, and that kind of thing. And then I force these people to come up here and talk about books that they've read and why they think that banned books or censored books are, I'll just say awful. So this is Dalton Steiner. He's weird because he's an accounting major. And I keep trying to get him to major in English, but he's like a senior. So he's actually minoring in English because he reads and does stuff like that. Okay, so this is Dalton. This is Josh Renner. He's a major in English. Writing concentration, in the writing concentration. I haven't hooked him into teaching concentration yet.
Well, I plan on becoming a teacher, just not through that.
What a dork. Okay. And then at the end, Malaya, Elbers is a writing concentration major in one of my classes. So I coerced these three people to come up and talk about banned books and censored books and the problems that censored books initiate and where it starts. So I've asked them to talk about a couple of books or one book that they felt should be taught in high school, and if not in high school, then in college classes. It's important to be exposed to diversity. So we're up here to talk about diversity, we're up here to talk about banned books, and I hope that you will participate in this discussion, because that's what makes a panel important. That's what makes a panel innovative. We're up here to provide some ideas, but and I'm a library person.
Yeah,
Why don't you go ahead
I'm
before I
Elizabeth Chance.
consume the entire time?
I'm Elizabeth Chance. I'm the digital curation librarian here at Forsyth, and I'm the token librarian on the panel. And I'm here to talk about the ethical obligations we have as librarians in making certain that people have access to information of all kinds.
Okay, so should I probably, okay, so I will probably start. Okay, in doing research about diversity, I found this article from WeNeedDiversityBooks.org, and Josh was kind enough to blow it up and and reflect the opinions of that. If you haven't gone on that website, you need to, because it lists several books that you might be interested in, whether it's humor, whether it's fantasy, whether it's historiography, whether it's like, I don't know, like books on chemistry and that kind of stuff. I don't know about that. Okay, so anyway, the mission of the diversebooks.org, putting books into the hands of kids who can learn from those books that they're not oddballs, that they're not outsiders. Our vision, a world in which children see themselves in the pages of a book. How we define diversity. We recognize all diverse experiences, including but not limited to LGBTQIA, Native, and that was my first exposure to diversity, teaching Native American and Hispanic American literature when I was just a young whippersnapper in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, the principal of the school that I applied to said, "Do you teach Native American literature?" Of course I do. "Do you teach Hispanic literature?" Piece of cake. I got the job because I lied. And then I spent my entire summer reading Native American and Hispanic literature. And it was tough because the people that I taught were Native Americans and Hispanic people who knew more than I did. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, I'll be fine. But you know what my one blessing was? I was pregnant. And they felt sorry for me, so they were probably nicer than they would have been. So, Native, people of color, gender diversity, people with disabilities, and ethnic, cultural, and religious minorities. So the philosophy of this particular website, we ascribe to the definition of disability, which includes but is not limited to physical, sensory, cognitive, intellectual, or developmental disabilities, chronic conditions, mental illness. Furthermore, we subscribe to a social model of disability which presents disability as created by barriers in our environment. And I'm glad to see within the last couple of years that there are more books published on diversity than there have been. There's a couple of sites like the National Book Award. I'm still frustrated with that particular award because if you're not a major publisher, you can't get your books listed on the National Book Award. So people that publish in small presses that deal with some of the issues that are up there, the LGBTQIA, people of gender diversity, people of color diversity, and disabilities are limited, but they're getting better. There are more books being published on those issues, and I think there needs to be more books that are published on issues of diversity, especially for our kids. I have an autistic granddaughter and a grandson who also is a special needs person, and finding books about those disabilities is very difficult, So they feel as if they're a part of the outside world. They don't feel included in their school sometime. So I've spent my last 6 months trying to find books published on those issues, and I found 2. And then I have students in class who are bisexual, and trying to find books on that issue is also very difficult. So I'm hoping that America and you guys wake up and say, hey, we need more books published on this so we're not feeling like we're outside the norm, that we're a part of the norm, that we can identify with the situations that people are going through. So I think with that, because I talk too much, right? Okay, they've always had me in class, so I talk too much. So I think I'll let them take over and talk about why banned books or censorship or the books that they've read have made an impact on their lives and why these should be brought into, I want to say middle school, I want to say elementary school, but I don't, that's not my field. Elementary, is that one of your fields, lady? I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Is elementary?
Library person.
Okay,
No.
yeah, the library person.
Okay,
Librarian.
librarian. I'm a librarian.
Okay.
Hey,
I
lady.
am the digital curation librarian, and I don't directly deal with collection development here. I have in the past, and I worked on adult nonfiction, and I have direct experience with, the conversations that go on within a library, because you talk about publishing books is important on these topics, but also librarians are kind of cultural gatekeepers, because just because they publish a book does not mean that anybody's going to find it if your librarians are not dedicated to making these titles available. When I first started in libraries, of course, you don't know what you don't know, and I had a director who, when our copy of Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov went missing, she said, well, we're not going to replace that. I said, well, why not? Well, I was molested when I was 12 years old, and I just can't stand the thought of it, so I'm not going to put that back in the collection.
Oh, okay.
And we don't realize that there are people like that that are barriers between authors and publishers and consumers.
So how do you select the books that you would purchase or would put on yourselves?
Hopefully, your institution has a well-defined collection development policy that has diversity built into it. Most libraries, especially one of this size, have collection development policies even down to the different departments. So like special collections, government documents, the archives, the general collection, they all have they have collection development policies that indicate what gets selected. And the hope there is that you are able to remove personal bias from those selections.
Well, I was on the library commission for 8 years, a long time ago, and it seemed like most people who protested books and wanted books banned were parents. And the one book I remember was I'm not going to remember the name, but Madonna had a picture, what's it called, a picture book of naked people. And oh my gosh, the people in Hayes just were like, get this book off the shelf. And our policy was, we need it on the shelves, parents need to choose what books they want their kids to read and not to read. So, this has been going on for a long time, and I remember, was it last year, Cheryl, do you remember that Addie Billinger made that bulletin board
Oh, yeah.
about the LGBTQIA? I'm sorry, I can't keep all that
Just love the
straight.
way you say it.
And she created this wonderful bulletin board at the Hayes Public Library, but was asked to take it down because it exposed elementary kids to that issue. And the library refused. They
Yeah.
said, we're leaving it up. And so they left it up. And it was a beautiful display of mostly young adult literature and elementary literature that dealt with diverse issues. So it was, the library took its stance, and they said, we're not going to take it down.
It was about 15, 20 years ago that there was a book about, My Two Dads or something like that.
Right, and that was the book that they, yeah.
It was a huge issue at Hayes Public Library, but they retained the book.
Yeah. You need to have these books available for everyone. So I'm just going to shut up, which is irregular for me. And I'm just going to ask Dalton, what do you think about banned books? What was your book that you wanted to talk a little bit about? And then we're going to have the audience and Jacinta and Holly speak about their books. It's going to be wonderful.
All right, so I remember in high school, a lot of the books that we had to read for English class, the most diverse I think we ever got was learning about like the Jewish culture through like Number the Stars, or racial culture through To Kill a Mockingbird, but that's about as diverse as we got. I remember reading Shakespeare, like Romeo and Juliet and everything, like you would expect in the English class, but we didn't really touch a lot on diverse literature. And one of the books that I really wish that I would have been taught in high school, because it's one of my favorite books ever, is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And the reason I like that book is because it talks about homosexuality, and it talks about like different states of mental health that people go through in regards to like grief and loneliness, and a little bit about suicide and how that kind of affects a lot of people. And we never talked about any of that in high school. And I came from a school that was not big. I graduated with like 10 people. But at the same time, I think that it's important that we talk about these things, because if you try to tell a kid, we're not going to talk about that because that's touchy for some people, even though that child is interested in it, you're basically telling them that's bad, or it's not right. That's not right. We shouldn't talk about that. It should be swept under the rug. And children are developing, and they're curious. And if you stop that curiosity, how are they going to see the world when they like get older? They're going to remember, for instance, like just going back to like homosexuality and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Let's say a child or middle schooler is interested in that book. It's very, the homosexuality in that book is not blatant. It's not the main focus of the book, but it's one of the most challenged books in America because of the homosexuality. And it's not even the main point of the book, but it's part of a side character in the book. And parents have such an issue with that book because of a couple of scenes in that book.
You think it's suicide too?
It could be suicide, but and there's a little bit, I've read somewhere that there's part of like, it talks bad about religion and things. Maybe, I'm not for sure. I never got that. I never understood why people would think that, but the majority of the people who don't like it is because of the unstable mental health of the main character, and it's because of the homosexuality of Patrick. And that's literally the two biggest reasons why this book is banned. And I don't think that that's right, because if you look at when this book was written, it was written in 1980.
That's right.
And I mean, we've come a lot further now in 2017 than we were at in 1980. So I think it's important to show kids that this book was written so long ago, about, not so long ago, like 30 years, but this
How
book
old
was
would you have
written,
to now watch
How old
it?
would you have to live to remember 1980?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
like this book was written like over 30 years ago, and it was still talking about these issues, and now they're even more, like, they're still relevant today. And so I think that that's important to show kids, like, we haven't gotten anywhere, and we need to talk about these issues, and you can't censor these issues, because when you censor them, that makes people think that they're wrong, or that if my teachers or people in this community don't want to talk about that, it's because they're scared. So I shouldn't be curious about that, because even though I think I'm figuring myself out, and that maybe this book can help me, I shouldn't seek that book, because I don't want to be seen as an outsider for reading this, or having people make fun of me for reading that. So that's kind of
Be a
my stance.
closet reader.
Yeah, that's kind of my stance on banned books and censorship.
I kind of want to talk about off of that is when people don't realize that you have a right to privacy for what you read. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you have a library card and you come and check out a book, let's say you're a teenager and you check out a book like this, and your parent comes to me and says, I think that my child is reading something I don't want them to read. Tell me what they checked out last week. I can't tell you, because we protect the freedom to access information, and we protect the right to privacy with that information, which is why so many parents challenge books, because that's kind of their only recourse, because if it's not in the library, their kid can't check it out. But if it's in the library, their child can access it, and we stand in between the parent and the child on that. And that's one of the few times in a child's life when they're at the library, that they have that protection of privacy for what it is that they're wanting to learn. So the healthcare industry is the only other one that protects privacy the way librarians do.
Used to be you'd sign a library card, which, the nostalgic in me is like, oh, it used to be kind of cool to see, oh, who else read this book before me? But now, I realize it's a more sensitive issue than that because of what you were talking about.
And
right there.
I've worked in libraries where they were really bad at privacy, where they would, for instance, a kid would be on the public computers and we had a Snoopy director. This is the same one that took Lolita out of the collection. And she'd watch what the kids were, looking at on the internet. And now, we did have a policy, you could not view pornography out in the public areas, but one kid was looking up stuff on guns, and she told this kid's parent. Out in Granby, Colorado, I was president of their library board, and that was a library district that was really good about privacy. You had to opt in for them to save your reading history, just so you could know if you would check something out. When you put a hold on something, they would get it from the courier, they'd put a little coded slip on it and set it on a shelf by the self-checkout, so you could come in, pick out the book, and check it out to yourself without ever having to involve a librarian in the transaction. So that's kind of where we're going in public libraries, is this kind of really important focus on privacy so that people can access this stuff.
Okay, Josh, what do you think? What's your opinion on this stuff, and what are you going to talk about?
So, kind of segueing off Perks of Being the Wallflower here, so that was published in 80, yeah? So, the book that I had was Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe, and this was published back in 2012, so this is a lot more recent, but it fights the same sort of subjects. I like to read the the Library of Congress listings, and it lists coming of age, families, Mexican Americans, friendship, and thus far, nothing wrong, according to everybody. But then you get to the fifth one, and it talks about homosexuality. And that's where everybody, rips their hair out and rabble-rouses and throws a parade. And the thing about that is many people realize that they, quote-unquote, aren't straight, if you will, around the ages that the characters in this books are. So we're sitting around 15, 16 years old. The protagonist is 15 at the beginning of the book, and the later love interest is also the same age. We have this concept that, and my brain just sort of stopped here a moment because I adore this book. The idea is that had I had this book when I was around this age, this is about the time I moved to the United States, had I been able to actually see this book and be able to read this in high school, it may have helped me with some issues that I was going through. I identify in the LGBT community. I'm bisexual myself. And I had no options. This book, granted I was, 21 when this book came out, but, had I had anything of this nature, had I had Perks of Being a Wallflower even. But what I wanted to point out is that I rented this from the Forsyth Library here, and it has these lovely pink J stickers, and those stand for juvenile. And, juvenile is 18 and under, I would like to assume. Yet, if I go to my local high school, I'll never find this book. If I go to my local middle school, juvenile, I won't find this book because, bless its heart, it has some F-bombs in it. It has some cursing. The characters are Mexican Americans, so they do use some Mexican slang. Bless its heart, we see this stuff every day on the street. I'm from the Dodge City area, and I heard this stuff every single day when I moved here. And yet I can't read about it and figure out, how can I see these connections? And I found a quote, Mrs. Wilson. I found a quote.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're telling me to do something other than just sit here?
My love.
Yes. Okay.
So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but at the bottom here, and I'm not sure if you can see it over my big head, but the idea is somebody, and as you were saying, parents are the ones who often challenge all this material. And it's this last sentence that really hits me.
Yeah.
Additionally, if it is a parent's choice, SIC by the way, Dr. Duffy, if it's a parent's choice to keep their child from reading certain books, it's not their job to also enforce that on other students. So this idea that, parents can have some semblance of control, sure. If a parent does not want their 10-year-old reading 50 Shades of Grey, for instance, okay, fine, I can respect that. But if another parent says, you know what, if my kid wants to read it, I should just be happy that they're reading in the first place, let them at it. Should it be taught at the middle school level? Okay, maybe not. Because,
Yeah, that's a
there
good
are
point.
some
Yeah.
concepts that maybe might not be for that age group just yet. Should it be taught at a high school? I believe so. Should it be accessible at the middle school, elementary school, high school level? Oh yes, absolutely. If a parent doesn't want their child reading that book, okay, all's fine, but they should not then take that away from other students who may be going through these issues, maybe going through these things, because sometimes we just need a connection. I mean, having a connection and knowing that someone else is out there that is also like us, especially, I'm from a rural town as well. When I moved to the United States, I moved to Spearville. I had a graduating class of 24 with three exchange students. And it was me. I was the only person who identified besides my boyfriend at the time. And we didn't know anything. We just kind of played with the rules, and we knew we were different, but we didn't have anything to connect to. And I wish that libraries would. I wish that we had this option. I wish that parents wouldn't, go out of the way to ruin the party for everybody. And I would really like to see these books in there, especially since we're going into queer studies. So.
Well, this is a good segue into Malia's
Yes.
talk, because she interviewed a high school teacher in Oakland, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, who teaches banned books and her philosophy of doing that. So you want to take over for a few minutes?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to talk with this teacher. She's in her third year, I think. And she actually came from a big school in Topeka, Kansas, and then is now teaching in Oakley, Kansas. So it was a very big difference for her in what is taught and what she had to kind of go through with teaching some of the novels. She does a segment on banned books, not necessarily young adult, but To Kill a Mockingbird, Huckleberry Finn, stuff that has crude language in it according to
That's the damn
parental.
hand.
Yeah, words like the N-word and stuff like that, that still is said today. That was said back in history. It's stuff that we need to know so that we're not repeating history. And that was one of the things she told me is she wants to keep teaching these novels because she doesn't want history to repeat itself. She wants these young adults to see these things and realize that this isn't something that we want to happen again. And then we kind of talked about what books she maybe wants to teach in the future. And I lived in Oakley for 4 or 5 years, so I know how conservative a town it is. It's small, conservative, Catholic, not that there's anything wrong with that. But you tend to overlook subjects like homosexuality, rape's overlooked. There's not much racial difference in a town like that. So they don't have that experience of meeting people that are going through these struggles and these issues. Some of the books she said she wants to try to teach in the future are Speak. It's a book about rape and the hiding of a rape. She wants to teach Silent Alarm, which is a book about a school shooting. She would like to teach The Book Thief, which is about the Holocaust, and that one's banned for some reason, and it's a very intense.
It's still on the banned book
Yeah,
list.
and it's one of the best books to read ever. It's phenomenal.
Suicide is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's banned because for some reason people don't want their children to learn about the Holocaust. Like, let's just put a blanket over and hide the fact that it ever existed in small towns. What sucks for her, she said, is that she has to put in extra work by doing a ton of research. Anytime she wants to teach a novel, she looks into the backlash other small schools have had and how the parents have reacted to these situations. And that's a lot of extra work for her as a teacher on top of creating outlines, all of that stuff. The main thing I think she said to me that I really took to heart is she said, they have worldly concepts and literary merit. If we begin teaching those books that push the boundaries at a younger age, it will have a better chance at changing people's minds. And I thought that was really important for any person that wants to be an educator. You have to kind of push those boundaries. Because if you don't start it at the middle school, high school level, they're just going to follow into their parents' footsteps and have this closed off world because they won't experience, especially if they stay in a small town like Oakley, Kansas. If you go to college, maybe you'll have that experience with others that'll help you grow as a person, but if you stay in that small town, you're never going to grow. And so I think it was really important for me to see her perspective on banned books, and I think it's important for any other future educators to know that you need to still push the boundaries, even if you have backlash from parents, and you need to make sure that you're teaching these novels at that age.
Jacinta, do you mind if I call on you about the banned books?
Since I just gave her
Jacinta taught in a
blood.
small
What would I
area.
know about that?
She knows a little bit about this subject. So if you don't mind sharing some of your experience doing that.
I taught high school in a very small town, it was about 3 years ago. Is that how long it's been since I
Has it been that
ran
long?
away from
Whoa.
it?
Rain screen.
Yes, and I wanted to teach Speak by Lori Halse Anderson, which, as Malia said, is about rape. And I was told that we could not teach that because, as the principal said, if we teach teenage girls books about rape, then they will pretend that they had been raped to get attention.
The logic, the logic.
So I got a little bit rebellious and, maybe taught some books that I wasn't supposed to teach and let the kids write some papers about books that I wasn't supposed to teach. And so now I'm back here.
The result.
So, I'm just curious, so Elizabeth, can you maybe talk a little bit about, so we've talked a lot about diversity in the publishing industry and libraries and accessibility. I'm just curious, why are we all here today, and what are we celebrating overall by just having the right to read what we want? And maybe speak a little bit more to that.
To the right to read.
Right to read and just our freedoms as individuals and intellectual freedom.
Okay, well, most people don't realize the American Library Association, the ALA, has a list of professional ethics, and we vow to uphold them as ALA librarians. And one of those is that we're going to protect the right to read and the freedom to information, which means that as librarians, we have an ethical obligation to make certain that books on all topics are available to the public. And this, in a library, gets expressed in collection development decisions. What do we choose to bring into the library? It gets expressed in weeding. What do we choose to take out of the library? Again, in privacy, how do we make certain that people feel that they are able to access this information? And, we've talked a lot about diversity and sexuality, but there's also the other side of this. In a previous life, prior to librarianship, I was writing a thesis for a master's in history, and my thesis was going to be on the American eugenics movement. And part of the research for that was finding all of these pro-eugenics publications that existed prior to World War II, but something happened in World War II that I just don't know what it might be, because we don't talk about it, that we decided that the American eugenics movement just kind of quietly died out after that. And what happened was libraries then weeded their collections, and they got rid of all of these old books dealing with eugenics. And so here, 70 years later, as a master's student, I had a hard time finding information on this so that I could write my thesis. And we don't, I hate to call them consumers, but that's what they are, consumers of information. As a consumer or a patron, you don't realize what all goes into the back end of you being able to walk to a library shelf, pick up a book on a topic that not everybody may agree on, and go and check it out and take it home and read it. So.
And then you bring up the sciences, which is interesting too, I know.
Right, I'm also the liaison to biology and physics here. So if you're a biology or physics student and you want something and we don't have it, come talk to me, we'll find a way for you to get it. But in the sciences, you run into a lot of challenged books. Right now, climate science is one that...
Really?
Yes, because...
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Don't you know, climate change is a hoax.
I know that. That's why I'm surprised that that's...
But
China.
people are challenging, research papers, theses, things that we would have on that topic, especially in biology, things on reproduction. I'm a parent, I have an 8-year-old girl, I bought her this, you know, it is the most benign, you have a body and it does stuff book. And I said, no, please don't share this with your cousin. So of course she goes and shares it with her cousin, sorry.
You're fine.
And my brother is not as open-minded as I am, and he comes to me and goes, how could you let them have this? And I'm like, well, they have a body and it does stuff. But he didn't,
They're gonna find out.
yeah, he didn't agree with that argument.
I'd like to piggyback on that really quick. So, I mean, that even happens in like the high school biology classes now, where the teacher back when she was still there, she taught a section on evolution, and she actually required all of us to sign and have our parents sign a piece of paper saying that yes, we were allowed to we were allowed to learn the evolution concept, and if they said no, if the parents said no, we had to go do botany.
Which, but,
Which,
you know, Mendelssohn.
don't get me wrong, but botany is a great thing, but we learned botany.
Find evidence of
chapter.
evolution.
Yeah, but no, we actually had to be approved to do evolution.
I think
because we read
Malia too,
Darwin.
when you interviewed the teacher, she said that she had to send home a letter.
Yeah, she
Before
sent
she
home
taught.
a letter with all of her books on it at the very, very beginning of the school year. And then if a teacher, or not a teacher, if a parent doesn't approve of one of the books, they have to like cross it out, sign it, and give it back to her. And she'll find another book for them to read that has somewhat of the same merit that might be more appropriate. And then she has to send that one home and have that one approved and signed before they can read it in her class.
That's so painful.
So it's more work for her
Oh, yeah.
to make the effort, and you can see why some teachers, I mean, teaching is hard work, and so you might just say, you know, this is a battle I'm not gonna fight, so I'm just gonna teach the tried and true, and we're gonna read the Scarlet Letter. Ooh, A for adultery.
Right. Which I have my 8-year-old read it because she is a very advanced reader, and we're at the point where she needs books that are, you know, at her grade level, but we have a hard time finding subject appropriateness because there's some conversations I'll have with her at 8. There's other ones I don't want to have yet. And so we've
Yep.
settled on if it's published before 1871, then she can read.
That's a pretty
Paula,
large
you're a
thing.
parent. What do you think about the whole banned book censorship issue?
I have all kinds of thoughts about banned books and censorship. Not as much as a parent. I guess I fight that on the other side. My ex-husband has different views on what's appropriate for our son than I do. He's very particular about what he can watch, and I think he will be as he starts reading. But as we were talking about Speak, that reminded me when Lori Holtz Anderson was here on campus to do an English workshop, I was here to present in the capacity I was working at the domestic violence shelter at the time. So I was to give a talk about that. And I had so many area teachers in my talk talking to me about books in my library. They were really concerned that students wanted to check out books like Speak. They wanted to check out books. They almost acted like if there was something wrong with these students. So why do they want to read about this stuff that's horrible? They talked about A Boy Called It. They said, why would they even want to read that? Because it's just so, what's wrong with them? And I was trying to explain, they're very empathetic. So even if you haven't experienced a rape, or even if you're not struggling with your sexuality, or you haven't contemplated suicide, but they're very empathetic and trying to understand the world around them. And if we tell them, what's wrong with you that you would want to check this out? I was just blown away. I was not expecting that question.
From educators.
From educators who were there to see Lori Holtz Anderson speak.
Who is this freak that writes about? It just never happens.
I kind of want to go off of that. So when I was actually it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I was not out at the time. And so when I was reading a book at home, I think I checked it out from the Hayes Public Library, and it was called Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda,
Yes.
which talks
Oh,
about
great book.
like a gay boy who is like having an online friend who gets bullied because people find out that he has an online friend that's a boy who he wants to be in a relationship with. And so I was reading that, and like I said, I was not out at the time, and so my mom saw what I was reading, and she asked me what I was reading, and I just said, oh, it's just a book about a kid who has an online friend, because I was not going to say what it was about. My mom remembered the title, Google searched it, found out what it was about, came up to my bedroom and said, why are you reading that? And I said, because it's a good book. And she's like, but if you're not that, then why would you read about that? And so that kind of just tells you about the culture that I grew up in and everything. But Yeah, I think that a lot of times people just say that like parents act, like this is taboo, like parents aren't gonna really act like this. No, parents really act like this. Like I 100% know that if, as much as I wish I was taught like the perks of being a wallflower in high school, like parents would have had an issue with it. Like there would have been a huge issue, even though it's not like the most dominant bad thing to talk about in the novel. So yeah.
My first year of teaching, and it was a long time ago, I taught To Kill a Mockingbird because I thought, 10th grade. To Kill a Mockingbird is a 10th grade novel, and the school board, parents complained to the school board, and I was brought up in front of the school board for teaching To Kill a Mockingbird because of the language and stuff. And if it hadn't been for the students who went to the school board meeting and argued for me, I would have been fired because of the language. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was 1970. I mean, that's how long ago it was. Okay, so I'm an old fart. So do you guys know that? Okay, so, but I couldn't understand it then, and I still can't understand it now. And To Kill a Mockingbird is on the list for banned books consistently. Every year. Okay, Lexi, you have a...
Yeah, I'm listening to all the great things that people are saying, and first of all, I had an absolutely heroic junior high school librarian. I grew up in Texas in the suburbs, and I'm old, so I was in junior high school from 1983 to 85 or 6.
Ancient.
Not as
Duffy wants to
ancient
throw
as I.
something at me now. But I read because there wasn't anything for me to do. My mom worked, so I wasn't being taken to 50 after-school lessons every day. So I went in and I would pick up books that were just there on the shelf. There was a section of fiction, and I think I worked my way through the entire thing over the course of 3 years. But I read books from my junior high school library that had relationships, characters in them who were having homosexual relationships. They were high school students. And the books were it was just there. Like it was just part of the story. I read books about characters who were Chicana and having problems because they were racially discriminated against. And even though those were not experiences or issues that I was personally dealing with, it opened my eyes to the experiences of other people, so that first of all, when I encountered people who were having those problems, I had some mental rehearsal to think about them, which I think is really important. But it also made me see people who had those different experiences as human, and I think that's one of the main reasons why literature helps us develop that sense of empathy. Like, we want to know about things. I think there's a certain level of prurient curiosity when you're in junior high and high school, but I think just finding out more about this. So when I went to college and I encountered many people who were gay and who were out, I did not have the same response to that as some of my classmates who had not been reading those books from our library. And I will say, these are not issues that we talked about at all in any book, in any class I read. We did read To Kill a Mockingbird, but we didn't read anything that had any characters that were LGBTQ related. We read very few books that were written by people of color, those kinds of things. So, thank goodness for the junior high school library. And I suspect those books were there because there were other kids like me who were coming in and reading. And I know that librarian was talking to those kids and steering them towards books that they needed to have in their hands. So,
Yeah.
Yay, librarian.
Love a librarian.
Yeah, we librarians can be a subversive lot.
So,
Right.
I just think that's critical.
You
I'm just
enjoyed
glad
this.
that people found those books, and I hope that you guys continue to. I know you are at the beginning of careers where you may be putting, you may be in charge of those kinds of things. So I think that's an important thing to think about.
Well, it's another thing, we look at how culture changes over time. 50 years ago, you would not have found a book that had an interracial relationship in it, an African-American and a white person. And now that's considered pretty, mild compared to
Oh, yeah.
some of the other things. And I would be surprised to find today that that would be a consistently challenged topic, which I'm certain it happens in parts of the country that are not as progressive. But I think right now, really, sexuality and religion is a big thing.
Really, very big.
Yeah.
That's a big issue.
One other issue I think is brutality right now, and there's some novels that we've read about police brutality, and not to say that it's happening everywhere, but African Americans and stuff they're going through. That's also a really big topic that's going on and very controversial right now. The book All American Boys is a phenomenal book that covers like those issues to kind of touch on that subject a little bit. And it's about a boy who gets brutally attacked and hospitalized by a police officer for no reason.
And I think bullying is another one of those topics that it's not necessarily controversial, but I think people want to ignore the fact that kids are bullied. Cyber bullying, bullying face-to-face. I actually had a student, which I was surprised at, last fall said that we probably shouldn't be reading books about this because it doesn't happen.
So,
And I walked up to him and I went like this. I said, "Do you have a fever? Is there something wrong with you? You don't believe that bullying is an issue that confronts all of us in some way?"
there's no
And so one of the
racism
top
in
10 books
America?
that is banned is a book about bullying. A Girl, Truth About Alice. Banned because of the issue of bullying and how high school students pick out people that they think are weak in some way. Or
Vulnerable.
I have 2 students in my class now who are were being bullied in Colorado, and they're atypical of the stereotype of people who are bullied. Gorgeous, intelligent, cheerleaders, etc. And they were bullied all through 4 years, and their parents didn't do anything, didn't step in and say, hey. One of them, thank God, went home over Christmas break last year because her brother had told her that he was being bullied in school. Parents didn't believe him. He was a freshman. And she went home, we talked about this issue in composition, and she went home, emailed him and said, "I'm coming home, take care of yourself, whatever. We'll see each other in a day or 2, whatever." And she got home, her parents were at work, she got home, went up to her brother's bedroom, and he was hanging himself from the fan thing. And she rushed up, got him up off of the thing, cut the belt, I don't know what she used to cut it with. But because of what we talked about in class, she knew that her brother was in trouble. She knew based on what we had discussed. So talking about these issues, and I don't care what it is crucial. And she saved her brother's life. Called the ambulance, and they took him to the hospital, and she had the guts to confront her parents and say, "You need to do this at school. You need to tell them that this is going on." So banning books, banning the concept of suicide or bullying or
In your head and
sexual orientation or racism.
All these
We need to
topics
talk
that
about
parents
this.
don't seem to want to talk about.
Yeah, so, anyway, I wanted to thank all these people up here for coming and being here. Does anybody else have any I think we still have a few minutes. Does anybody else have anything to share about? Yes.
I just think it's kind of funny, they keep bringing up the issue of language and reasons they're banning books and sexuality and things like that. When I was a freshman in high school, it was when like the vampire stuff was going around, so everyone was into that crap. And there was a particular series that my friends and I were reading. It had very intense and graphic violent situations and sexual situations and strong language, and no one had said, you know exactly what I'm talking about, you
Yeah.
just said it. So,
What is it?
House of Night.
and no one said
Oh,
anything
okay.
about it. So I just find it really funny that everyone's fine with that one, but everything else is some serious issue.
No pun intended. I think they kept that one in the shadows.
Oh, that's a good one.
You most certainly
Okay.
did intend that.
I just think it's to like tangent off of that because you brought up vampires. I think it's interesting to note that when books like Twilight become popular, I want to just point out the fact that Twilight is maybe one of the worst ways to portray a relationship ever. It's really stereotypical. It's really bad because when people want to be in the relationship like Edward and Bella were in, that's not good. But when parents are like promoting that book and saying, "My gosh, have you read this? Like, you have to read this book," we're doing the wrong thing. And so that's why I think that it's so important to challenge those ideas because I almost want to say that a teacher almost taught Twilight in my English class. I want to almost say that, or like she was reading it and she was like, you guys all have to read this. Which, sure, if you want to read it, that's fine. Like, read it for pleasure, but don't read it to educate people because there's nothing educational about it. What's education like? Go ahead.
I taught Twilight in young adult lit a couple years ago because I wanted to use it as a bad example. Writing. So I think there are some books, and I don't know if Holly and Jacinta and Dr. Duffy and Lexi would agree, but I think there are some books that you use as an example of what not to teach or the themes not to talk about. So I hate this series. I think
I read the
Stephanie
first
is just
book
kind of
and-
like, whoa, dude, let's get a shark and get her out of here. But I did use it, and it was difficult to use because I have, you know that I'm assertive about a lot of things. Okay, so it was like, oh my God. But I'm gonna do it anyway. And I paired it with another book that was really good. And if you guys are interested in fantasy at all, any of you that read books, you need to read Leigh Bardugo. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, you need to read her. She is unbelievable. And she just came out with the graphic novel Wonder Woman. I ordered it.
Yes.
And she's got a new series. Yes, I'm a graphic person too, novelist person. Unbelievable. Read her. Read, is it 6?
6 of Crows.
Yeah, read 6 of Crows. Just start it, get past chapter 1.
You won't be able to stop, so you can read the second one in the same night.
Yep.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't do that or anything.
Unbelievable. So, anyway,
Well,
it's a
thank
good
you.
thing that I don't consume a lot of time. Don't you think? That I allow other people to really participate in.
Well, thank you to our panelists. And just as like a takeaway for today, we talked a lot about banned books and challenged books, but I think a takeaway would just be to challenge yourself to read something that's uncomfortable
Amen to
and
that.
celebrate your right to read and the freedom of
That's
speech
what I
as
like
well.
about this poster. I think that is so cool. What to read. Yeah.
So, thank you all.
Uh-huh.